Got a new antenna project here at WX0V. For years I've used my Mosley TA33 Junior Wark for 6 meters, but it's not supposed to be for that band. And I wanted a small little 3-element beam for 6 meters, so I ordered an M2 6M3, which there are no videos of on YouTube. None. And to support it, I've got this Rohn 9H50 push-up mast, which goes up somewhere around 34 feet, although I probably won't have it up that high. I've carefully cut the package open here because it's my understanding some of the Rohn towers, these push-up masts, don't have the best quality control. And so I want to make sure I save the packaging in case I have to send it back. You see the pins are on the very end here, so I have to cut those off. Here is the M2 6 mic 3 6 meter antenna in its unassembled form. The elements are right here. They're not marked, so you have to go by the measurements supplied in the owner's manual to determine what is the director, reflector, and driven element. And here's the gamma match and nuts and bolts and whatnot. I couldn't find the ballon. This is RG6 that you coil up for the ballon because it was tucked inside one of the boom elements. Here are the destructions. Fairly standard, fairly basic. I wish they had photographs and not illustrations, but it's not necessarily a totally hurtful thing. All the pertinent information is clearly marked. The construction, or maybe in my case, the destruction process is underway. And I'm doing this in the house because it's 30 degrees outside and because I can get a lot of it done inside. This is actually the director and one part of the boom, and the reflector is right next to it. And these are just held on by a screw and a lock nut here. So pretty simple construction. Here is the main section of the boom. The other part gets held to it with a bolt and a nut. This is the driven element, and it's same construction as the reflector and director, and this one gets put on with a 2-inch bolt here, and it goes through to this trans match which sits on the bottom. And as you can see, there's an SO239 on one side, and on the other side the end connectors for the ballon. Okay, I've got that on there fairly secure, and now we will add the shorting bars, which are found right here. Quick note about the shorting bar: it has 2 different hole sizes. The larger one is for the driven element. The smaller one here at the bottom is for the T-match. Slide this on, and there we go. There's a certain distance this needs to be. I need to consult the instructions for that. And once you get that distance determined, then you put in the set screws to keep these in place. The distance here from the T-match block to the shorting bar should be 8 inches. An M2 gives you a proper sized Allen wrench. That's a victory. I think I'm just going to get it snug. And according to my ancient tape measure here, it's exactly 8 inches from the T-match block. Perfect. Alright, the ballon is installed. I've seen better coils, but that'll work. And I snugged these down with the 7/16 wrench as recommended by M2, so they're on there pretty good. So we're ready to take this outside and put it all together. We're outside now in the 32 degrees Fahrenheit weather, and it's beginning to look more like a beam. We just have to attach the main boom to the sub boom here, make the boom all one piece, and secure the reflector, and we'll be all set. Just found out that it's going to be 8 degrees Fahrenheit next week, so this is definitely the right time to do this. So it's all set. The M2 6M3 6 meter beam, fully assembled. This is the mounting plate to go from the boom to the mast, and here are the U-bolts for the mast, and they fit into the drill holes perfectly, so no problem there. But here's what the issue is. These are the U-bolts for mounting the boom to the plate, and they don't fit. They're supposed to go right here, and I can get one of them in but not the other. So either these holes were drilled in the wrong location and they're too far apart, or these U-bolts were out of spec, one of the two. Well, I got it. I had to use a ingenious redneck device, but I got it. And this is the U-bolts that affix the plate to the mast, or the antenna to the mast, and it's too large. And I suspect they did that on purpose because they want you to use a beefier mast. Mine's a little bit thinner than this. If these threads were a little bit deeper, I could have made it work. Or if there would have been spacers in here, I could have made it work. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to go to a hardware big box store and see what type of solutions are available. Turns out I had these plastic 1-inch spacers on hand, and maybe not a perfect solution, but seemed to work well enough. This is the next day. And as you can see, whoa! Almost got knocked over there. We're not putting up any antennas today. This is the risk you take when you try to put up an antenna in a cold climate in the month of December. Mother Nature stopped by, and well, as you can see, she did some redecorating. Her and I can never agree what color we want for winter. I always want brown, she always wants white, and well, she usually wins. The 6M3 is propped up here in the garage. Not so sure we're going to be able to get it installed this winter, but I don't know, we'll see. Here we are. I've cleared out an area of the snow so I can work, and I've had the 6M3 with the Rohn 9H50 in the air, almost to max height. But now I've got to attach coax and guy lines to it. All right, well, we got a chunk of LMR 400 here. Let's add the guy lines and see if we can hoist her up. The M2 6M3 6-meter beam is installed. I still have to hook up a PL259 to the radio end of the LMR 400, but it is at least installed. If I can get the coax run through the house this evening and get that PL259 terminated, we should be okay. But the guy wires, or guy lines I should say, are connected, and we'll see how this works. If it's if it's a failure, you'll never see this video, but we'll see. At least it's up and running. And as a point of information, it's currently 25 degrees Fahrenheit. I have a crawl space, not a basement, and I call it the pit. And I hate running coax. I hate it. So last night after running the coax, I was all fired up, went up to the radio and keyed the transmitter, and high SWR, super high SWR. So it's instant depression, jump off a bridge, all hands to emergency escape pods. What in the world is wrong with this thing? Well, I found out what was wrong with it as I look back on the video of the construction of this antenna. I realized the T-block was put in backwards. I had it flipped. The SO239, which you can see has nicely been sealed with amalgamated tape, should be facing the director, which is the short element here at the end of the boom on this short piece right here. That's what I screwed up. So you can flip this thing around by just loosening the shorting blocks and then the bolt on top of the boom, and you can flip it, and that's what happened. So things were in the wrong direction. I have since put it in the correct direction, and we're back in business. The lesson to the viewer is simply this: don't trust WX0V for your technical information. I'm a dumbass. All right, got the balance secure, and that looks better than it did before. The self-amalgamating works beautiful on the PL259s, but these are just, again, there's just not enough space to use it, so, well, that'll just have to do. Medic! One thing about the Rohn 9H50 is it is heavy. Unlike those fiberglass masts that some people use on 6-meter installations, this weighs way more than that, so it's a bit of a struggle to get it in the air. But it's heavier duty, and I'd like to think that it will be more durable. At this point, I wish I had one of those lightweight fiberglass masts, but I don't. Probably would help to have a second person here too, but I don't. All right. There we go. There we go. Like I said, it weighs
quite a bit. A little bit of a struggle, but she's in.
Now you want to be careful here, but I use a ladder and go up a couple of runs on the ladder. It gives you more leverage when you're pushing the mast up. Now to raise each section, you loosen up these little L bolts here, but this is very important. Make sure you have work gloves and are wearing work gloves. Vitally important. Here's the reason why. There's a gap in between each one of these tubular sections, and when raising it, invariably what happens is you'll lose control of it and it'll slide down. If it slides down and your hand is in here, this will tear your skin right off. So very important to wear work gloves. Even though the 6M3 only weighs about 7 pounds, it's still a lot of effort to get that pushed in the air. And most of that is the weight of the Rohn 9H50. And there she is, up about 30 feet or so. It's not going to be a flamethrower, but it's going to get me on 6 meters better than I am right now. Let's take a closer look at the support system here, which might bring a groan or two from the viewer, but if you have some feedback, I'd love to hear it. The main support is a 5-foot long piece of PVC. 3 feet of it is in the ground and 2 feet of it sticking up, and the diameter is 2.5 inches, which is difficult to find. I had to special order it. The reason I went with 2.5 inches because the Rohn 9H50 is 2.25 inches in diameter. With the gap caused between the 2.5 inch PVC and the Rohn 9H50, I'm using these cotter pins to help fill that space. I wish I had something better, but that's what I have for now. For additional support to the PVC, what I added was about 4 inches or so deep of rock in a maybe about a 6 to 8 inch circumference surrounding it. I did this with my mailbox over a decade ago and it's rock solid. Now if this was a permanent installation, I would have used metal instead of PVC and I would have used concrete instead of rock. Now I'm using the Armstrong rotor method on this antenna, and how I keep it in place is I've got this galvanized nail right here, and I've got a hole drilled through both the PVC and the 9H50, and that basically locks this in place. And I've got a different hole here for each direction. Here's northeast, here's east, etc. It's difficult to see, but there's a through bolt here that goes through the entire 2.5 inch diameter of the PVC. It's a pretty thick bolt and it's unthreaded through the diameter section of the PVC. That's what the Rohn 9H50 sits on, and that allows me to turn it, and it also prevents the 9H50 from digging into the ground. The guy lines are made of Mast rope, and they're being held on by 6-foot fence posts. 3 foot of it is pounded into the ground. This Mastrant's really good support line, but you do have to seal these ends. Finally, I have an eye hook into the side of the house, just grabbing on to the 9H50, which prevents it from wobbling to the south. However, I currently don't have a support that prevents it from wobbling to the north, and that's something I'll have to address. It's 17:42 Zulu, which is 11:42 a.m. Central Standard Time. Still have time before kickoff here on Sunday, December 12th. Let's check that SWR. All right, 100 watts out, flat match, beautiful. The all-important FT8 frequency, or I'm going to be a little bit below it. Beautiful, look at that. Absolutely beautiful, exactly where it should be. All right, let's check the amp at 5302. Let's put a kilowatt into it. 1.2 to 1. Not bad. Now this doesn't mean that the 6 Mic 3 is a flamethrower antenna, but it does mean that I have a good relationship between my radio, the coax, and the antenna. That's all SWR is, but it's a good sign. That's a first down and more! All the way to the house! Here is my carved path to my 6-meter antenna through about 6 inches of snow. Some parts of the Twin Cities just got 19 inches. Glad we didn't see that here. Want to talk a little bit about the stability of the Rohn 9H50. Earlier in the week I lowered the antenna because of a storm system, and this morning I raised it back actually a little bit higher than what it had been. I raised it somewhere around 31 feet or so, and it just wasn't stable. It was clearly unstable, and I think the problem child was the second section. Now the first section, which is at the top, is up. I've got that extended by about maybe 2 or 3 feet, and the second section I had fully extended this morning, but again the instability of it caused me to lower the second section or shorten it to about 5 feet or so, maybe 4 feet, and then I fully extended sections 3, 4, and 5. Of course, section 5 is always fully extended. But if you're going to extend the Rohn 9H50 to its full 34-foot length, you had better have lots of guy wires because it is just not stable. The 6M3 is only about 2 pounds of wind load and only weighs about 6 pounds, and it just was not. I just didn't feel comfortable at all with it. And with my installation, which I realize is redneck and not optimum and not what Rohn says for this, you should have multiple guy wires or guy lines, and I don't, but it's fine here at about 25 to 27 feet, which where it's at right now. But I wouldn't extend it much above that without additional guy support, because the 9H50 just is not designed to handle that kind of load at that type of height. Here's a couple of extra supports that I don't know if I showed in the previous video. One is just a blockade bar, and that's to prevent the antenna from going into the house, because as you can see there's a gap between the house and the antenna. And the other guy rope there is to hold the antenna from blowing away from the house. Speaking of bad instructions, here they are for the Rohn 9H50. Yeah, that's right, they're attached to the product. Not real good. Where instructions would be handy is with these cotter pins that came with it. There's 4 of them. Now I believe they're supposed to go in these holes all the way through the mast and keep each section in place. However, there's no instructions. The other issue though is trying to get these holes lined up when you're pushing the mast in place is not easy. I couldn't get it, so I just kind of gave up with it and decided that I'm just going to use the L bolts here to hold things in place. If it doesn't, well, I'll just have to re-raise it and secure them again. The guy rings on the 9H50 don't seem to turn well. Now that might be a fault of the sharp angle that I have the guy lines connecting to it at. You can even see here this guy ring here. I mean, it turns, but it's almost sticky. It's almost like it maybe some lubrication in there or something, I don't know, but they don't turn real smoothly. Otherwise, so far everything seems to be okay. All right, disclaimer time. This is not an idyllic installation, not by a long shot. And I'm not telling you that this is what you should do at your station. No, not at all. So it's kind of do as I say, not as I do. What this is a video showing you the installation of my 6 Mic 3 at my station. A note on M2's customer service. I called out to their company twice, and both times I got someone who was polite, professional, knowledgeable, and most of all, patient with my stupid questions. So kudos to M2 for great customer service. The M2 6M3 is a wonderfully engineered antenna. The build was quite smooth with the exception of the out-of-tolerance U-bolts and my misunderstanding with the T-match block, which I wish they would have had a warning in the instruction manual saying that if you reverse it, it will make the antenna not function properly, but so be it. It still was my fault. Now the SWR curves on the antenna are perfect. They're beautiful, exactly the way M2 said they would be. Unfortunately, there's no real way for me to see how the antenna is working, because here's a look at the 6-meter band during the month of December in the state of Minnesota. Pretty much dead. We're not going to see any action till spring, so why did I get the antenna and install it now? Well, simple. First of all, 2021 product shortages have been terrible, and the product was in stock, so I decided not to take a chance to wait till spring. And as far as installing it during the winter, that was kind of unique and also gave me a chance to see if the antenna would at least be installed properly and work. How well will it work? Will my install last? Time will tell. 73, and thank you for watching. From Whiskey X-Ray 0 Victoria.